many Americans are noticing the price of food has increased substantially, putting pressure, of course, on regular people who suffer from low wages, lack of benefits. The average working person just can't seem to get a break. So now the prevailing wisdom from economists is, well, that's because we're spending too much. The federal government spends too much. We gave too much money to regular people, ignoring, of course, trillions of dollars that they sank into the banks in liquidity during the coronavirus pandemic. But no, they blame it on the spending. And of course, Fox News conservatives will blame it on the unemployment benefits. And also generally blaming Democrats and Joe Biden for this inflation. So now, look, inflation is real. It is getting kind of bad. For example, since September 2020, food prices have actually increased about 4.6%, with the price of meat, poultry, and fish and eggs surging the most over the past 12 months at about 10.5%. So now that's an enormous jump in prices. That's a lot of pain for regular people. Gas has also increased. Cars, the cost of cars has increased. And so, look, there are people and an economy that is actually quite vulnerable. And so, and by the way, it's also happening under a Democratic administration. So, of course, well, that's a double whammy for the Biden administration, who has to deal with this. However, a new analysis actually points the real finger at wealthy corporations as being the major driver behind the increase in prices. In fact, researchers at the Groundwork Collaborative, a progressive think tank, says that addressing the crisis means recognizing these price increases for what they are, the result of deeply entrenched, concentrated corporate power. So wait, now how is it the company's fault? Well, they explain that the more sway megacorporations have over our economy, the more power they have to gouge customers, squeeze Main Street, and exploit workers. This is according to Rakeen Mabood, chief economist at the Groundwork Collaborative. So the higher inflation rate, he explains, in those industries, researchers noted, can be attributed to decades of consolidation, which has given a handful of corporations an ever greater degree of market control, and with it the power to set their own prices. And they use the meat industry as an example. We only have 4 major meat processing plants. They control more than 80% of the beef industry and more than 60% of the pork industry. Since they have so much control over the markets, they can basically collaborate to dictate prices. So now, for one, it's got 2 different effects. For one, farmers and ranchers will get crushed. So their returns will get flattened. And the company can then also raise prices for consumers. So as a result, we've seen a 12% increase in the cost of beef and a nearly 10% increase in the cost of pork over the last year. So now there are different factors here. For one, you could say, well, pandemic, right? It's a pandemic, it's supply and demand. Well, okay, but this isn't quite like other goods. So understand that food production is necessary. It didn't abate during the pandemic. It didn't stop. And as a result of the price increases during the pandemic, their profits did incredibly well. In fact, the 4 major meat processors actually gave billions of dollars to their shareholders in dividends and bought back millions of dollars worth of their own stocks. So they did the stock buybacks. Gee, so I wonder what happened. Wow, they raised their prices, and they were able to, as a result, give massive dividends to their corporate boards. Gee, I wonder what the problem here is. Oh, it must be Joe Biden. It must be the Democrats. Now, of course, they are at fault for not actually trying to fix the problems, to be fair, but they also didn't quite cause the problems. In this case, it is unchecked corporate greed, which they could absolutely do something about, but they choose not to. But let's go back to the price of eggs. So the price of eggs has risen about 9.9% since August of 2020. Now, state governments, including Minnesota, Texas, California, and New York, as a result, have sued the egg producers and distributors for illegally raising the price of eggs during the pandemic, doing price fixing. As one lawsuit put it, jacking up egg prices is allowing these companies, including some of the largest producers and wholesale distributors of eggs, to profit from the misery of millions. So again, they're arbitrarily raising prices, gouging customers, and working together generally as a market, since they have so much of the market, to fix prices. When did we see that happen before? Oh, right. Oh, right. Toilet paper, hand sanitizer, bottled water. Okay. So, and by the way, when the producers raise prices, the stores, which are another part of this chain and another part of the problem, they hand the increased costs down to us consumers. In fact, Kroger is a great example of this. Kroger charged customers more while simultaneously suppressing wages amid the COVID-19 pandemic. Now, researchers explained here that Kroger spent the summer of 2021 gloating that a little bit of inflation is always good for our business, before citing inflation to justify price hikes. Kroger publicly acknowledged that they could get away with increasing prices on consumers as long as prices didn't rise by more than 3 or 4%. And that's exactly what they did. As a result, that same year, the Kroger CEO earned 909 times what the median Kroger worker earned. This is while also cutting pay by 8%. It's funny. I thought they were supposed to be essential. They're supposed to be essential. Well, aren't they heroes? Didn't you go around all these stores and all these? Oh my God, workers, heroes. We should really do something for these. We should recognize these heroes that are working during this pandemic and exposing themselves to risk and terrible customers. I know. Let's maybe give them a tiny little bit of hazard pay and then immediately take it away and then increase prices. Suckers, we're going to make more money. And that's exactly what happened. And by the way, during that same time, they did $1.5 billion in stock buybacks. $1.5 billion. And that was just between April 2020 and July of 2021. All that money that they made, they didn't need to raise prices. They didn't need to inflate their prices. No, they had all this money, but instead they did stock buybacks, which, by the way, they artificially drive up the prices of shares, which again benefits wealthy investors. It's how you can make more dividends. Now, that doesn't mean the company's more valuable. It doesn't mean it's more profitable, but it does give nice dividends to the shareholders. And again, all of this is why you're paying more for food. It's not that there's a supply crunch, right? And it's not that these companies are barely struggling to survive. No, these companies are doing incredibly well. Now, Mahmoud said this. He said, these concentrated corporate power has systematically stripped down supply chains and created room for pandemic profiteers, as well as longstanding underinvestment in our economy. Again, there's other factors as well. Again, a lot of this stems from the pandemic, and these people have came in, these executives, and said, we can use this pandemic to our advantage. And look, as I said, there are supply chains disruptions as well, directly related to the pandemic, global shortage of semiconductor computer chips, supply and demand issues. But at the heart of why food costs so much is, again, raising prices, even though they have massive profits. Now, other companies have decided to dial back production. That's why, for a while, lumber cost a lot, and fired workers, only to be surprised that demand went back up. But they decided, by the way, to not hire people back at higher wages. Now, you also have truck drivers. There's an issue with that. Again, poor pay. Grocery store and fast food workers, poor pay. And so now, as a result of all this, people are saying, well, I don't want to go back to those crappy jobs. They don't pay enough. There's not enough benefits. And so we're not going to do these jobs anymore. Another factor, of course, has to do with politics. Democrats did not decide to raise wages when they had a chance, thanks to Kirsten Sinema. And so they don't even really plan on doing that, by the way. Now, Republicans in states ended these expanded unemployment benefits as well because of the so-called labor shortage, which isn't actually a labor shortage. And they did so because, well, yeah, Americans they're being lazy. They're being lazy. That's not true. Again, a lot of the states that ended those benefits saw absolutely no change in the unemployment rate at all. At all. Now, the thing is, Americans aren't lazy. What's going on is companies don't pay them enough. They can afford childcare with all the other stuff that's risen in price, again, as a result of greedy corporations, which is why Americans are going on strike. In fact, you have 10,000 John Deere workers. You're about to have 60,000 stage workers go on strike. Kellogg's, you have miners on strike as well, and so you've got a lot of workers that are finally fed up with all of this, with the poor pay, and now, of course, the price gouging as well. While these companies make billions and billions of dollars off the pandemic. By the way, these companies also receive tons of money from the government in handouts from the Paycheck Protection Program. And these same companies don't pay their fair share in taxes, while the middle class and the working poor get shafted. They get hosed. These are problems that the government could fix. Either party could get together to fix these things through good monetary policy, good directed spending, other legislative fixes, but unfortunately refuse to do so because they have, in the end, been corrupted by a gigantic sea of corporate money. If you enjoyed this video, please give us a like and share with your friends. You can subscribe and help out the channel by becoming a patron. It's patreon.com/Jeff Waldorf, or you can become a channel member as well by hitting the join button below.